Welcome to the NHL Wraparound podcast featuring Neil Smith, President General Manager of the 1994 Stanley Cup champion New York Rangers, and longtime ESPN NHL veteran Vic Morren. Together, they share no-nonsense opinions on news and issues around the National Hockey League. Whether you're a casual or diehard fan, each episode of NHL Wraparound will leave you more informed. Now, here's your hosts, Neil and Vic.
Welcome to NHL Wraparound. Vic Morren, Neil Smith. The Olympic break is here, but plenty to talk about before we bring our guest, Mike Harrington from the Buffalo News in to talk about the Sabres and the turnaround that they have had since early December. But overall, just good to have a little bit of a break here.
Well, we've seen the schedule be so compressed that it's hard to keep up with when you have this many games going on, meaning this many injuries, meaning this many everythings. And it is good to have a break. It's well needed, I'm sure, by everybody not participating in the Olympics.
But first, 3 things you need to pay attention to. And speaking of which, as we just mentioned, the break is here. All 32 teams have sent their teams off with a various amount of ceremony around the league, kind of a nice touch. And on Saturday, 4 planes will head to Italy. And once those planes leave, that's your team. If you have any injuries, it's too bad at this point. Your rosters are there. The one notable replacement that came down on Thursday for Team Canada, Braden Point, who was hopeful to play in the Olympics, will not be able to go. He will be replaced by the Carolina Hurricanes' Seth Jarvis. The men's tournament starts on Wednesday. Canada plays Czechia, and the U.S. plays against Latvia on Thursday. The women's tournament is already underway. So I think one of the nice things about this also, Neil, is that we have the ability to watch hockey during the daytime now, as opposed to everything running late into the night.
I guess that depends how you look at it. I'd rather not watch hockey during the daytime. I'd rather do what I do during the daytime. But for those avid fans that want to watch it during the daytime, that can get off work, I guess, or whatever, you'll be able to see plenty of it.
Sure, a lot of people at work will be keeping their eye to the side, maybe have a second screen going so they can watch the games. Item number 2. The Lightning and the Panthers, they're at it again. On Thursday, a 6-1 win for the Lightning. There were 149 penalty minutes between these clubs in this game. And in the 7 games that these teams have played against each other, going back to the preseason, which there were 3 preseason games, 4 in the regular season, 793 penalty minutes in total. And in the third period of this one, there were 5 fighting majors, feature bouts, Matt Tkachuk, Brandon Hagel, J.J. Moser, and Gustav Forsling. There were 10 misconducts or game misconducts handed out, including Florida head coach Paul Maurice, who you could see was agitated in this one, literally from the outset. He was getting on the officials for sure, a couple of missed icing calls, and not a real good way for Florida to go into the break.
Well, I think that Paul Maurice probably knew how weak his team was going into this game with all the injuries and players that couldn't play in the game. And it's probably extremely frustrating for him to go into Tampa and have a game go on like this. And then you're always going to dislike a couple of calls by the referee when you're coaching. So I'm sure that just set him over the top. Eventually the ref said, you've had enough. You better go back to the locker room. And Paul was gone. Jamie Compon, his longtime assistant coach, took over for the rest of the game.
You mentioned the injuries, and the Panthers played this game without Brad Marchand, Evan Rodriguez, and Aaron Ekblad. And to make matters worse, late in the game, goaltender Daniel Tarasov had to leave after he was stretching post to post, lower body injury. So at least he's going to get some time to recover during the break. But what a statement for the Lightning. They're now 19-1-1 in their last 21. They win the regular season series from the Panthers 3-1. And a little bit of revenge for John Cooper's team, because the Panthers had to go through Tampa and route to both of their Stanley Cups. I think it was acknowledged by the Lightning and Julien Brisebois that they weren't tough enough. And boy, they are getting back at the Panthers. And this was a terrific statement by them.
Well, it definitely was, but remember that it was a very undermanned Florida Panthers team. So they made a statement, and that's great for Tampa, and Tampa's proven that they've toughened themselves up. It wasn't against the real Florida Panthers. It had Barkov and Ekblad and Rodriguez and so on. They should take it and build on it, but I don't think it's anything for the Panthers to get too down about. The Panthers have to get down about the place they are in the standings, because it looks at going into this Olympic break like Florida will not make the playoffs this year. They're just too far behind, and we'll see. Maybe they can have a miraculous run in the post-Olympics, but it certainly looks doubtful.
Wild card 8 points back of the second place wild card team, which is the Boston Bruins, and there are 25 games remaining. But I want to make one more point about this rivalry between these clubs, because I think it's always easy to get caught up in the moment. And, of course, we had the white heat rivalries going back through the 70s and 80s with the Rangers Islanders, Nordiques Canadiens, Flames and Oilers. And we've seen so much through the Norris division over the years. But I think this is probably the most dislike that we have seen between two clubs since Colorado and Detroit 30 years ago.
A much different dislike, but yeah, I would think this is Gen Z dislike. This is not the Colorado Detroit dislike. The things that were called fighting last night, other than one that I saw, which was Hagel putting a beating on Tkachuk, these wouldn't have even been called fighting majors in the old days. So yeah, these two teams I don't think like each other. You've got to remember too that they've won, 4 Stanley Cups out of the last 5?
Yeah.
And so obviously they both want to win that third Stanley Cup in this time frame here. Tampa, of course, already has 3. But yeah, there is a big dislike for them. And it is a geographical rivalry when you think about it. It's just like the Islanders and Rangers, the Flames and Oilers. But it's really good for the game. It's good for the league. It makes things interesting.
Item number 3. Oilers star Leon Draisaitl critical of the coaching staff and team leadership after the Oilers lost their 3rd game in a row on Wednesday evening in Calgary. Quoting Draisaitl, "It starts with the coaches, everybody. You're never going to win if you have only 4 or 5 guys going, and it starts at the top. Our leaders can be better." And this is a pretty big statement coming from Draisaitl, obviously calling everybody out. And when you talk about the 4 or 5 guys going, I don't think you ever have to worry about him or McDavid or Hyman for that matter. But to speak out against the coaching staff at this point, what was your initial take on it?
I'm just shocked that, whenever anybody speaks out against the coaches, it's shocking. I read it that he says that the captain and the assistants can be better as well. Our leaders can be better. Well, there's no bigger leader on that team than Connor McDavid, so he has to be singling him out as well. It's not just the coaching staff. So it was quite a statement, quite a frustration for Draisaitl.
Are you surprised that we have not heard anything from McDavid on this? Because I sure was.
Well, I'm sure there's been some questions asked of him of what he thinks of this whole thing. I haven't seen them, but I'm sure he's either neglected to answer them or there's been something. But I'm not really surprised that they wouldn't just let it die where it is. Just let it go.
But didn't McDavid kind of want Knobloch to be the guy?
Not that I know of. That's not true. So I heard that Knobloch was hired by Jeff Jackson and at the time Ken Holland. And yes, there was some knowledge that he had been the junior coach for Connor McDavid. But according to Connor McDavid, they never spoke to him about it.
Okay, fair enough. But I want to go back about 4.5 decades now, because does this remind you of the dynamic in Edmonton before this one, where Gretzky was the generational talent? And yes, I'm using that term for this purpose. But Mark Messier was the emotional pulse on the team. And I think we're seeing the same dynamic here with McDavid and Draisaitl.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, they're much different players, obviously. It is two very different players. Messier was much more physical, obviously, than Gretzky, and much more physical than Draisaitl or Connor McDavid, and took matters into his own hands physically. Gretz was not only a generational player, but whatever comes above generational, I would call him that. So, yeah, same thing to a certain degree, but I don't think Connor McDavid and Gretzky are at all alike. I could see a little bit of a comparison with Mess and Draisaitl.
The Oilers hit the break. Second place in the Pacific Division, but only 4 points clear of a playoff spot, and they are tied for the most games played in the NHL with 58. So they only have 24 games left coming on the back end of this, so they're going to have to get this ship in order and quick.
They are going to have to get it in order and quick, and I don't think they're going to be able to do even close to what they've done in years past. Now, maybe they'll get into the playoffs. They won't be a top seed, but I just don't see the depth on this team being like it's been in the years past, in the last 2 years. I think they're middle six, they're lower three, they are just not as good as they used to be. And this is what happens in the cap era when you have to use your money to make sure you pay your stars. Where does it come from? Well, you start letting guys further down the ladder, you let them go and try to fill in with other guys that don't cost as much.
And that'll wrap up 3 things you need to pay attention to. Now, let's bring in Mike Harrington from the Buffalo News.
Well, it's my pleasure to welcome back to NHL Wraparound Mike Harrington of the Buffalo News. Mike, it is unbelievably different where you are than it was last time we had you on, and that's why both Vic and I were so looking forward to this as someone that we really enjoyed having you on the first time when things weren't so good in Buffalo. Now things are good in Buffalo, albeit last night, a bit of a bump in the road with a loss to Pittsburgh at home, where they've been so good. They've only got 8 home losses, which is the least in the East, tied with Carolina, Pittsburgh, and Boston. But they've been terrific at home. Their wild card won. They're 5 points clear of being out of the playoffs. But I guess the overall question is that I would say to you if we were sitting having a beer is, what the hell happened? How did this turnaround happen? This is incredible. I don't know that I've ever seen anything like it.
I was telling people it's the greatest in-season GM bump in NHL history. They fired Kevin Adams, and all of a sudden Jarmo Kekalainen looks like a genius, and he hasn't had to make any roster moves. As a matter of fact, he can't touch the roster because if he did, people would think he was crazy. But that's really a simplistic answer. Certainly the culture has changed. Kevin Adams simply had lost the faith of the team, the fan base, everything. But he acquired all these players. He's going to get some votes for Executive of the Year if this continues. But what happened is really the question here. The thing that happened is twofold. Jarmo Kekalainen came in and said, no one is safe here. If you don't want to be here, you can leave. There's no favorites. There's no safety net for anybody. Now we have to work hard, and we have to go play, and we have to be difficult to play against. And that was the first thing in a team meeting that they had on their West Coast trip. Remember, Kevin Adams was fired. They were on a 3-game winning streak when he was fired. So now you look at it, and they go on a stretch. They go 23-1 in a 24-game stretch, which basically takes you from the bottom of the East into the middle of playoff contention. And in fact, last night, had they beaten the Pittsburgh Penguins, they would be second in the Atlantic Division at the Olympic break, which is pretty remarkable. But what we've seen is tremendous depth through the lineup. They got healthier, tremendous goaltending, and guys, really defensively, now you've seen them come to light. Dahlin, potential superstar. Mattias Samuelsson might be the most improved player in the entire NHL this year. Owen Power, former #1 overall pick, coming into his own. Bowen Byram, Stanley Cup champion with the Colorado Avalanche, continuing to mature through his 20s. I've told some people when they went into Toronto last week and they really boat raced the Leafs, Morgan Riley would be the number 5 defenseman on the Buffalo Sabres right now. And he's the guy who the Toronto Maple Leafs are kind of pinning their hopes on their back end. He would be a third-pair guy on the Buffalo Sabres. Between the combination of their defense, tremendous goaltending from Alex Lyon, a unbelievable free agent pickup in the summer. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen much better. Offense through the lineup. Tage Thompson got his 30th goal last night. They have depth. They've been running 4 lines out there. It's unbelievable. They were 11, 14, and 4 and going nowhere, and here they are.
So, Mike, I got to ask you as a follow-up to that, Terry Pegula, why now? Like, what woke him up? What coffee did he drink to suddenly decide that at that particular point he was going to make the advisor, the GM, and get rid of Kevin Adams? Like, this was sudden when it happened, just as sudden as this new life that's been pumped into the team.
Well, 2 things really happened there, Neil. The first was the day after Thanksgiving, Pegula happened to be in the building. They lost to the Devils 5-0. They had 42 shots on goal. They didn't play terrible. But the fans started chanting, "Fire Kevin, fire Kevin," and he heard it. It's happened before, but he heard it in person. And the other thing people started chanting was, "Sell the team, sell the team." So I think that made some inroads on Mr. Pegula as well, that he needed to make a move for the culture of this club. Now, he promotes Jarmo Kekalainen, which was the worst-kept secret in the entire NHL. But what Jarmo Kekalainen did was he got Terry Pegula's ear about not payroll. There's no real problem with the payroll of this club. The problem was the makeup of the front office. They weren't spending enough money. They didn't have enough NHL experience. Now, the players were immediately impressed. They had an 11-year former GM as their new GM. But what did Jarmo Kekalainen do? He hasn't made any changes really with the roster. He went out and hired Mark Bergevin, a guy who was in the Stanley Cup final and was a former GM of the year, to be his associate GM. He got Josh Flynn in here from Columbus, a guy who has done tremendous work with the salary cap. He got Tracy Roost in here from Tampa Bay, a guy who won Stanley Cups. And Stacey Roost is a guy who's going to help them in the minor leagues and in pro scouting. And Bergevin even said they were thin in pro scouting. So now all of a sudden the players see, wow, we've got a front office, we've got adults in the room. And that's been a huge mentality change. It's been a huge change in sets of eyes, and we'll see what it does at the trade deadline. But there is now belief in the room that they have a NHL comparable front office that they really haven't had before.
But the interesting thing is, it's still the same team on the ice. So let's take this behind the bench. And have you noticed anything, either system-wise or otherwise, that Lindy Ruff has been doing since early December that is markedly different from what went on before that, when they were 3 games below 500 before that overtime win in Edmonton?
They really have pushed the pace a little more, especially from the back end. I mean, they are a 4- and 5-man unit plowing up the ice now, and teams just can't keep up with them. And I wrote one of my columns recently, every team that plays the Buffalo Sabres looks slow, and I have to stop criticizing this team's really slow, this team's really slow. Well, the Sabres were making everybody look slow, and they were doing it with the defense really pushing the play. And I think the real key here, Dahlin, certainly had a lot of off-ice issues this year with his girlfriend, his fiance's heart transplant. Mentally, he has now been in a much better place. Physically, he's in a better place. But the transcendent play of Samuelsson and Power this year has really been a boost, even from last season. There was talk in the fan base of buying Samuelsson out after last season, which Adams clearly spiked that talk right away. But this guy has really been physically assertive out there. He's mentally sharper out there. He's become an offensive player. He had 7 goals his entire career coming into this year. He's already in double digits now. So that's one thing. And the other thing, Vic, really is they're just listening to Lindy Ruff. They're playing Lindy Ruff's system. Lindy Ruff is able to get them to forecheck hard. He's able to get them to backcheck hard. And these defense releasing down the ice were creating a lot of odd man rushes against them last year. The forwards have figured Lindy Ruff's system out. They are covering for these defensemen, and these goaltenders no longer have a lot of odd man rushes against them, and it all adds up to a better overall performance.
When you take away the fact that this team has not made the playoffs in 14 seasons, and now you look that they can roll 4 lines, and in addition to Thompson and Tuch, they've gotten good contributions from Benson and Quinn and Doan, and that trade certainly has worked out with Utah. That I look at this team, and if I could block out the last decade and a half, this is a good club that if they make the playoffs, I believe they're going to be problematic for a lot of teams out there.
I think some fans were certainly trying to figure out how much of a fluke was this. We saw a 10-game winning streak in 2018, and everything went away. Well, this is too much of a large sample size. This is too many players playing well. This isn't a one-line team. This isn't a goalie, carrying you through all the way. This is a deep team. You look at it, there's not anybody who really scares you in a playoff series. They just had an overtime game against Tampa. They were 25 seconds away from victory. They have 3 more meetings with Tampa. Really, the biggest mismatch, so to speak, for the Sabres right now is the one they're in. If it ended today, they would play Carolina. They have not won at Carolina since 2016. So that would be really problematic. But, my feeling is, to me, I would be rooting all day and all night for Buffalo versus Detroit. You're talking the drought series. The 2 longest current droughts in the league could end against each other. Somebody would win a first-round series, and the Detroit Red Wings, who deserve a home game is what I'm talking, not the win. They have not played a playoff game in Little Caesars Arena since that building opened. Those fans in that building deserve to have playoff games in it, and this is going to be the year. And why not have it against the Buffalo Sabres? And, oh, by the way, when Patrick Kane sets the record for American points and gets to play his first career postseason series against the hometown team.
I've known Lindy for a long time. He played for me back in 89, 90, and he's a great guy, funny guy, and stuff. What is he saying now? Like, I can't imagine him being, in his 60s now and starting off, and it looked like there was no hope in the beginning of the season, and he was back in another situation like in Jersey where, he was in trouble. And then all of a sudden it just turns around, a switch flips. What's it like to work with him now, to interview him post games and practice days and things compared to what it was like before?
Well, you know what, Neil? I think Lindy Ruff thought, like a lot of people did in this organization, he thought they were going to be good this year. What we've seen lately to them isn't the surprise. The surprise was starting the season 11-14-4, which was riddled with injuries. There was a stretch of 4 straight games they lost in overtime. They struggled on the road, something awful. That was the surprise. That's what they couldn't figure out. And the Sabres had a big celebration recently for the 2006 team that lost to Carolina in Game 7 of the East Final, coached by Lindy Ruff. And there is a pattern there. That team came out of nowhere. There were no expectations. There were a lot of empty seats in the building the first 2 months of the season. They came out of the lockout on a house on fire. This team, no expectations, a lot of empty seats in the building in October and November. And everything turns around in December. It's a very similar pattern. And can this team go to Game 7 of the conference final? Who knows? Right now, they just got to make the playoffs after 14 years. But I think I agree with Vic. Matchups are everything, but they're dangerous. There's no one that they would play in a first-round series that they're going to be intimidated by playing whatsoever.
I think also there might be a little bit of aura with them getting into the playoffs for the first time since 2011. But I want to move on to another player in particular here who's going to be an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year. And there was talk really at the beginning of the season when things weren't going well. Were they going to try to move Alex Tuch? He's making $4.75 now. You'd already said that payroll is not a big thing here. And now this is a team that I think people want to be part of, and Tuch certainly appears to be among that group.
So Alex Tuch is a guy who grew up a child of the Goatheads. A couple hours down the road in the New York State Thruway, we've seen pictures of him as a 5 and 6 and 7-year-old in the late 90s, early 2000s with his dad at Sabres games. All he has wanted to do is win here, and that's what's happening right now. So you say to yourself, is he going to leave? Is he going to go out in free agency when they are finally showing they can win here? Well, they got to pay him. And when Adrian Kempe, who is his comparable in L.A., got $11.5 million, are the Sabres going to do that for a guy who's going to start his deal around age 30? I don't think they can do that, but he's at 4.75. He's been a bargain with his contract from Vegas. Can they get to that $9.5, $10 million range? And, to me, he's worth it. he's a tremendous two-way player. He kills penalties. He can score goals. He's a leader. He's been in the Stanley Cup final with Vegas. They have to figure it out. But here's the thing to watch, guys. They're not trading Alex Tuch. You can't devastate your locker room. All right. You're trying to win now. Enough about the future. If Alex Tuch turns into your own rental, so be it. It can happen. You can do it. Jarmo Kekalainen did it with Artemi Panarin in Columbus. And you know what? I cover a lot of baseball, too. It's not a crime in baseball for a guy to play it out and walk away. It's kind of considered a sin in hockey for some reason, and it really shouldn't be. I tell people all the time, the Toronto Blue Jays just did it. We watched them do it with Bo Bichette, and they got a 3-run homer in Game 7 of the World Series from him. He walks in free agency. So if Alex Tuch can help this team into the playoffs and deep into the playoffs, and he walks in free agency, so be it. But I think he's not going anywhere.
So you've seen so much for so long, and as we hit the break, Sabres, as Neil had mentioned at the top, 5 points clear for a playoff spot. The cutoff is 99 points. So that would mean that the Sabres would need 29 points in their last 25 games to reach that number. So it's only 4 games above 500. So as you see this team gearing up for the stretch drive, we come back to play on the 25th of February. The trade deadline is March 6th. What do you want to see Kekalainen do as his first moves to try to get this team positioned to not only clinch a playoff berth, but perhaps make some noise once they get there?
It's really simple to me. He has to get another veteran defenseman in here. Connor Timmins has been on his team, did a great job on the PK, broke his leg with a shot. He'll be coming back. So that's an addition, but they need to make another deal for that, second/third pair guy to take up some of the minutes from the top 4. You are not going to go deep playing 4 guys 25 minutes every night. And we saw against Pittsburgh, Bryson and Kesselring, the third pair, really struggled. Kesselring has had an injury-plagued season. Bryson is just a 7th, 8th guy. So that's the first thing Kekalainen needs. He's going to need another depth forward, too, but they're a little thin right now with Norris and Benson out, and Greenway might be out. So they could use probably another winger on the bottom 6, but that depth defenseman is job number 1 for Kekalainen because he doesn't need a top 6 guy. He doesn't need a goalie. He needs more depth on defense to carry him through.
What do they say? You need about 9 defensemen to make a serious run?
And this franchise knows. Remember what happened in 2006. They're celebrating the 20th anniversary. They got beat in Game 7 at Carolina when they had 4 of their 6 defensemen out with injuries. They were playing on number 10 and 11. Now, you don't normally have to go that deep, but they need to have some depth here on the defense situation. And, you look at the schedule, it's tough. I mean, they come out of the break at New Jersey, and then they go right back to Florida, Tampa on the road again. They got 3 games left with Tampa. They got 2 games left with Vegas. They have a tough schedule these last 25 games.
Well, Mike, we really appreciate you coming back on and doing this again. And it's a lot more fun when it's positive than when it's negative.
It was certainly, Neil, unexpected. I think, like I said, they thought they were going to be in contention this year. But sometimes you see it. A team just finds it. And they find it, and that snowball, as bad a negative snowball can roll, it can roll the other way too when you get good. And you can see the confidence in the room, in the playing style, in the coaching, in the fan base mostly. There's still a little PTSD from previous years, but I think we're going to see this team go right to the end. There's no reason they should not be in the playoffs. After that, who knows how deep they go. But this has got to be the year the Buffalo Sabres and the Detroit Red Wings both end their droughts.
Well, that'd be great, and we'll wait and see if that happens. And in the meantime, thanks, Mike, for doing this, and as always. And we're all watching Buffalo to see if this is the year finally that they can get back into the playoff mix.
All right, Vic, Neil, thanks very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. Neil, it's hard to not pull for this Buffalo Sabres team after so many years. I mean, Buffalo is just the city of heartbreak. It happened again during the most recent NFL playoffs. And I think if any fan base deserves a little bit of happiness, it's the Sabres. And I think Mike did a great job just putting everything into perspective, where this team is, where they've been, but more importantly, where they can go.
I love having Mike on the show. I enjoy his knowledge. I enjoy talking to guys that have been in the locker room all season long like he has and have watched this thing. And a real Buffalo native. He's not against the Sabres or the Bills or anybody. He wants them to win, but he reports it as it is. And so I thought the whole thing was interesting. The Kevin Adams to Jarmo Kekalainen piece, the piece with Lindy Ruff being able to coach in a different way now, even the Terry Pegula piece, that he happened to be at the game and hear the chanting of sell the team and fire Kevin. We don't know whether that really did promote him to do that, but it certainly makes sense. But I thought the whole thing was really good. The conversation about Alex Tuch was great. I know his dad. I met his dad at an Islander game and got to talk to him about his son. So, it's really good. Mike is a great guest.
I thought one of the most interesting aspects was the fact that there had been no player moves, and that apparently the biggest change has just been the attitude within the components that have been brought in through the front office.
It's hard to imagine, right? Like when you haven't been there, that's why we have Mike on, because when we haven't been there, it's hard to say, well, it's the same players. You go from Adams to Kekalainen. How could that make a difference?
Yeah.
Especially being a former GM. I think like that. But that was a great explanation that Mike gave us.
Really great stuff. And hopefully the Sabres can bring this to the finish line. Let's now transition to some other news around the NHL. And a couple of days ago, the New York Rangers sent Artemi Panarin to the Los Angeles Kings for a prospect and a conditional draft pick. And we don't want to beat this too much because we've beaten up on the Rangers so much. However, you did some research. And when we look at the work that Chris Drury has done over the past couple of seasons, and you got to remember that the Rangers were within 6 wins of the Stanley Cup, both in 2022 and 2024. And Drury has literally taken this team apart. And, your breakdown shows what the Rangers have gotten in return for the players that they have dealt away.
Yeah, and it doesn't include the draft picks because Chris Drury took over on May 5th of 2021. So his first draft was 2022, and obviously then 23, 24, and 25. They're too young to really be able to judge those players yet. However, if you just look at on-ice product at Madison Square Garden of what he inherited and what he has left today, and where did these guys go and what have they got, you get this list. You get Goodrow, who went to San Jose on waivers. You get the aforementioned Panarin that you just mentioned that got a prospect and a conditional pick. You get Kreider. There's nobody on the team for him. You get Strome. There's nobody on the team for him. You get Jacob Trouba, the captain, was traded to Anaheim for Vakanainen. He is on the team, Vakanainen, although not the defenseman Trouba was or is. Philip Hedl was traded to Vancouver in the one deal that you would say that Chris Drury won by getting JT Miller, who's now the captain of the team. They were forced into trading K'Andre Miller to Carolina because he wasn't going to sign, we don't think, or wasn't going to accept the money that the Rangers would pay. So he was traded off to Carolina. They do have Scott Morrow in return for him. Again, not even close to K'Andre Miller. Andrew Kopp was on the team. There's nothing back for him. And Capo Caco, who was second overall behind Jack Hughes, was traded off to Seattle for Will Borgen, the defenseman, who is on the team right now. But that's a small return for a second overall. Ryan Lindgren, who's gone, and nobody is here for him. And then Riley Smith, who they had for just one season, has gone back to Vegas and is a pretty good player again for Vegas, and the Rangers have nothing. So that's a lot of players. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 players gone. Only 3 came back.
When you look at this club now, And there are some pieces here, and I think we've got to remember that Igor Shesterkin and Adam Fox have been out for prolonged periods. Mika Zibanejad has had probably the strongest season of any player on the team. Vincent Trocheck still there. You've got some youth with Will Cooley and Noah Laba. I'm not even including Alexei Lafreniere in this. There are some parts here. So is this as bad as we have made it out to be? Or is the reality what we're seeing in front of us?
No, it's 100% the reality of what we're seeing in front of us. It is not a good product. They lose on a nightly basis. You can't blame it all because Shesterkin's not back and Fox isn't back. I mean, yeah, those two guys would come back and help them win a couple of games, but they're nowhere near the playoffs with this kind of lineup. So the question has to be, what is the plan? What did you go into this thinking you wanted to do? And this nonsense about retooling is sheer nonsense. I mean, you don't, as you've said, you don't retool something you've ripped down. You've got to rebuild it.
Part of that rebuilding could start through the 2026 NHL entry draft, but some disturbing news coming out of Penn State regarding the likely first overall pick, Gavin McKenna, who on Saturday was charged with 4 counts, including felony aggravated assault, misdemeanor simple assault, and that was filed by the State College Police. That felony charge was dropped Friday afternoon when the Center County District Attorney reviewed the video evidence and learned that the extent of the man's injuries who had been hit by McKenna were not as severe as initially reported. Initial reports said that the man had suffered fractures on both sides of his jaw and that a tooth was missing. However, it has now been determined that the fractures occurred on only one side of the jaw and no teeth were missing. Still, McKenna faces a misdemeanor count of simple assault and summary offenses of harassment and disorderly conduct, and he has a preliminary hearing for those charges scheduled for February 11th. But in your days as a GM, you would bring these players in and interview them and see how they would perform under various situations and stress levels and things like that. And if you're the Rangers or the Canucks or the Blues, who are now 1, 2, and 3 in terms of lottery probability, do you have concerns with this player?
I think you do, of course. I mean, when someone does this, he's not known as a tough guy or anything or as a goon, but I think we all know, Vic, that you cannot strike somebody for words. Because somebody says something to you or your family, you have no right to go and hit them. And he went and beat him up badly. Of course, you're going to take that into consideration and ask him all about it. But at the end of the day, overriding a lot of things will be his ability as a hockey player and what he can do going forward. You'll look for his remorse about the situation. You would talk to him about, why it happened, how it happened, along with psychologists and scouts and other people. You'd try to figure it out.
And of course, McKenna being from the Yukon, this is the first year that players that have been in Canadian Junior have been allowed to come down and play in NCAA Division I hockey, and this is not a very good look here.
No, it's not. Let's find out what happened before we make a judgment on him. But at the end of the day, as I said, like if he is a franchise player, which is what people are talking about, I'm sure he'll be able to get by this. I mean, Patrick Kane, if you remember, had a lot of black marks on him during his early part of his career. And so he got
cab driver in Buffalo.
Cab driver in Buffalo, some ugly pictures out of University of Wisconsin. There's been a few things with him. So at the end of the day, hopefully he's interviewed properly by whatever team is going to select him in the draft, and he puts this behind him.
Let's have a little bit more discord while we're at it. And this one comes out of Philadelphia, where second-year forward Matvei Michkov and head coach Rick Tocchet appear to be going at it. And Michkov last season was talked about as a Calder Trophy candidate. Played 80 games, 26 goals, 63 points, and 16 minutes and 41 seconds of average ice time per game. And this year in 55 games, he's only got 13 goals, 29 points, and his ice time has been diminished by almost 2 minutes per game on average. Michkov reportedly came into camp out of shape, and even though Rick Tocchet has been criticized for diminishing Michkov's time on the ice and even diminishing his roles, if a guy's out of shape, I think the coach is totally justified in doing that.
Yeah, you have to come to camp in shape. Everybody is put to that test when you get there. And if Michkov was out of shape, certainly that would raise the ire of a brand new coach for the team, Rick Tocchet, and especially the shape Rick Tocchet played in and is still in his career. He's still a specimen. So you can't blame Tocchet for doing what he has to do. And the thing is that the head coach has the latitude to develop these players whatever way he sees fit. So, this goes on the player. It's got to go on the player. It has to be. It can't be on the coach.
Supposedly, he did not work out for 4 months. And even though general manager Danny Briere is saying he is getting himself back into shape, the truth of the matter is that every other player in the league has increased their conditioning level as the season has gone on.
That's right. You've got to come to camp in tip-top shape. It's not like the old days of the original six where training camp was actually to get in shape. Yeah. This is a time now where you've got to come. You don't have to work in the off-season like they did in the original six. Your only work should be physical conditioning.
Briere said Michkov is not going anywhere when talks about maybe moving him were brought up. And at the same time, Tocchet is in the first year of a 5-year contract. So what do they say when you've got conflict between two sides and maybe there's a little bit of an impasse? Put them in a room, give them baked beans, and make them work it out.
Yeah, well, and I wouldn't want to go in that room with Rick Tocchet and try to work it out, even if Rick Tocchet is 50-something and Michkov's only 20-something. That'll be a tough one. I'm sure they'll get it worked out, though.
Let's give some plaudits to a couple of defensemen that hit the 20-goal mark over the last couple of nights. First, Wednesday, Zach Werenski, the Columbus Blue Jackets, hits the 20-goal mark for the third time in his career, 7th straight win for the Blue Jackets as they continue to try to push their way into the bubble. They are currently wild card 3, just 4 points back of the Boston Bruins. And in Washington, Jacob Chychrun with 2 goals, the win against Nashville on Thursday. He's up to 21 and his second consecutive 20-goal season. The defensemen this year just doing an unbelievable job putting pucks in net. I mean, we've mentioned these two. Of course, we've talked about Darren Radish in Tampa. And you have to include Evan Bouchard in Edmonton. And just the impact that these players continue to make offensively is really something to augment the offenses of their respective teams.
And then you've got Matthew Schaefer with New York Islanders, who's already up to 15 or 16 goals. Werenski is a special talent. He's been that for a while. He's had a lot of injuries earlier in his career. He seems to be past that now. Jacob Chychrun has become a new player in Washington. He was always good. He was good in Ottawa. He was good in Phoenix. But he's been outstanding in Washington. And as you said, he got 2 goals against Nashville to get his total up to 21. Really, really good things. Exciting when defensemen score goals like that. It's very exciting.
Let's hit our personnel notes, and we'll continue with the Capitals because in that win against Nashville, they also got Pierre-Luc Dubois back in their lineup. He had missed 47 games with abdominal and abductor surgery. He had a goal and an assist in his return, and also back goaltender Logan Thompson, who missed 4 games with an upper body injury. Also in Calgary, Jonathan Huberdeau will have hip surgery. He is going to be out for the season. He elected to play one final game against the Oilers on Wednesday, and in that win, He scored the opening goal for the Flames. And finally, Caleb Jones, defenseman for the Pittsburgh Penguins, suspended 20 games for violating the NHLPA performance-enhancing substances program. So a little bit of a blow there. And, of course, Jones is the brother of Florida Panthers star Seth Jones.
Correct. And we don't know what that substance was. And we don't know if he took it by accident or it was in something else or whatever. But there are banned substances. And if they find them, when you get tested, they find them in your system, you are suspended.
He said that he had taken them as part of his rehab. Unknowingly, there was something in there. And so, like you said, whether intentional or not, if they find it, you're suspended.
That's right.
And one other note coming out of Pittsburgh with the Olympics at our doorstep, Neil and I would like to extend best wishes to Craig Patrick, who appeared on a Hall of Fame show with us back in October. In late December, Patrick suffered a severe stroke, and he has been in acute care and recovery for the past month and is expected to return home next week to begin the therapy and rehabilitation process. And of course, Patrick was the assistant coach and assistant general manager for the Miracle on Ice team in 1980 under Herb Brooks at Lake Placid. So now that we've hit the Olympic break, all teams prohibited from practicing from Friday, February 6th, which is today, through February 16th. Clubs may resume practice at 2 o'clock local time on February the 17th. The NHL schedule resumes on Wednesday, February 25th. About 69% of the schedule has been played, so teams roughly have 25 games remaining. And I think a big thing to look at here is how hard these coaches are going to start driving these teams for when they start coming out of the break, because you've got so many clubs in both conferences that are in bubble position, and you cannot afford to wait 10 to 14 days to get your game in order once the schedule resumes.
No, you've got to come out of the gate fast in this second half here, which is really, it's not a half. As you said, it's about a third, but you've got to hit the ground running when this thing starts up, or else you're going to be left behind.
And during this Olympic break, we're going to give you our planned recording schedule, because we are not going to do daily recaps of every day, every game that goes on. We will do quick takes as deemed, perhaps after Team USA and Team Canada games or anything else of note that takes place, but we've got no set schedule for that. We'll try to bake in a wraparound, maybe a Hall of Fame show, and towards the back end of the break, Neil and I are planning 8 12-minute shows, 4 teams apiece, and we're going to be looking at the playoff prospects for all 32 teams. So I'm really looking forward to that, because it's going to give us a chance to do some research, really distill these schedules, and see what the chances are for all 32 clubs, ranging from 0 to 100%.
Yeah, and it also gives us a good look at how wrong we were on some of these teams in the preseason and how right we were on some of them in the preseason. But there's a lot this year that I know that I got wrong, that I didn't foresee their future properly. I'm not sure if you could with a crystal ball, but in any case, it's going to be fun to do those shows.
You know, you and everybody else, though. It's me, it's Jeff Marek, everybody. And I think if you look at the prognosticators throughout the league, there's nobody that's got a perfect sheet or anywhere near close to it.
No, I wouldn't think so, because there's some that are just shocking.
That'll wrap up our show for today. Thanks to Mike Harrington, the Buffalo News, for joining us.
Let's thank our listeners, you guys out there that listen to us religiously, and those of you who have just tried for the first time, thank you for doing that. Please leave us a review or subscribe if you can. You can reach us too individually at our email address, which is neil@nhlwraparound.com or Vic@nhlwraparound.com. On all podcast platforms, you will find NHL Wraparound, including Apple Podcasts, Amazon, iHeart Radio, Spotify, and YouTube, as I said. And let's talk about the latest subscribers that we have. Wob Fighter and my friend Jackie Belaires, who happens to be the bartender next door at our local place called Maggie's.
All right. Well, welcome to both of them for being part of our subscriber family. And you can also find us on X, Instagram, TikTok, and Radiate TV. Our website is NHLWraparound.com. And in our blog section, we have New York Centric, written by Patrick Hoffman, Neil's Nuggets, who has his latest in there regarding the musical chairs in the Eastern Conference, and Smith's Picks. And you hit the break at 64 games. No, you hit the break at 164 games, over 500. But now you're going to be taking this to audio coming out of the Olympic break. So I just hope that, you don't get a little bit camera shy here and start to fumble these things away.
No, but let's see what happens in this last half. Is it going to be easier to predict? Is it going to be harder to predict? I would imagine as the season goes on, it gets a little bit easier.
Just because you're doing these electronically or you're doing these on mic now should not affect anything.
Right. Correct.
All right. Enjoy the break, everybody. We will talk to you at some point later next week.
Thanks for joining us on the NHL Wraparound Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on all the NHL action.